Welcome to Naya Daur's discussion on women in political leadership as we honor International Women's Day. International Women's Day is marked annually on March 8th to celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness about women's equality, and to lobby for accelerated gender parity. And one of the most important ways to achieve gender parity and women's equality is through political engagement and representation.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me? You guys good? Okay, we have an exciting panel of dynamic Pakistani American women with years of experience and background in organizing, running for political office, serving in government as elected officials and political appointees, heading national political campaign efforts, and more. I wanted to start off by...
Can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Talat, I think you might be, maybe Talat is having some technical difficulties. Maybe she'll log back on. Okay, I wanted to start off by introducing myself. My name is Sumbul. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas, and I work for the United States House of Representatives. I'm also the president of the Muslim Democratic Caucus of Texas and have worked on various political campaigns. I would now like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is the Honorable Mir Siddiqui, who is currently serving her second term on the Cambridge City Council and first as mayor of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Mayor Siddiqui immigrated to the United States from Karachi, Pakistan at the age of 2 along with her family, and she's the first Muslim mayor in the state of Massachusetts. Mayor Siddiqui has been politically engaged or civically engaged from a very young age. She's received numerous awards for her civic engagement and her work. She did her bachelor's degree in public policy from Brown University. She also served as an AmeriCorps volunteer at New Profit. And then she completed her JD from Northwestern School of Law. And then she moved back east and she practiced as a legal aid attorney with Northeast Legal Aid, serving communities of Lawrence, Lynn, and Lowell, Massachusetts. Throughout her time as a public servant, Mir Siddiqui has advocated on behalf of the city's most vulnerable, strive to create more affordable housing, and protect households under threat of displacement from facing eviction and homelessness. Mir Siddiqui's focus has primarily been on promoting equitable access to education for Cambridge families by increasing scholarship funding for low-income children to attend high-quality preschools and advancing the implementation of a children's savings account program alongside the vice mayor. As mayor, Mir Siddiqui continues to promote affordable housing, addressing the region's broader affordability crisis. And since COVID-19 has occurred, Mir Siddiqui has been on the ground running with various programs, which we can hopefully get into with her in just a little bit. Our next panelist is Dr. Senna Sayeth, who's the Executive Vice President of Community Outreach and Development for Nicholas Residential, and she's currently running for Dallas City Council, District 2. Senna is also the founder of Kimya International, a 501c3, a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about humanitarian efforts through documentaries, photography, and short stories. Previous to her current work, Senna served as the director of the Public Information Office, and she was the spokesperson for the city of Dallas. She managed the city's international responses to the first U.S. case of Ebola and the July 7th ambush on Dallas Police Department officers and worked closely with community and civic leaders. Senna began her career as a broadcast journalist and over a period of 10 years worked as an assignment editor, producer, reporter, and news anchor. Senna holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in economics, a Master's of Science in journalism from TCU, and a PhD in public policy from UTA. Our next panelist is Dr. Amina Zia, who served as a political appointee in the executive cabinet of St. Louis County government and spearheaded a countywide inclusive policy to accommodate head coverings, as in hijabs, by using a stakeholder approach. The policy is now replicated across the Justice Service departments across the country. She is a professor of political economy and gender politics and founder of a social impact consulting firm. Our next panelist is Aisha Yuki, who's an attorney and social entrepreneur and activist here in North Texas. She's a founding member of the American Muslim Professionals of Dallas and is an active member of the Dallas-Fort Worth Muslim Bar Association. Aisha received her bachelor's in political science and international studies from Southern Methodist University, where she also received her Juris Doctorate. She is on the national board of APPAC, and she was one of the driving forces, one of the leaders of Pakistanis for Biden. And our final panelist is Stellat Hamdani. Is Stellat back on? Oops. Okay, we'll hopefully get her back. Talat Hamdani ran for Brookhaven Town Council, and actually her experience begins before that. Talat basically came on the scene after her son, who was a 9/11 first responder, passed away in the attack. And when her son did respond to the attacks, and he went missing, he was actually originally suspected of being affiliated with the attackers. So that launched Talat into her career, or her passion of speaking up against Islamophobia and advocating for the Muslim American community. And we're going to try and get her back on. Let me see what's going on with her.
I see you. Can't you see me?
Yes. Okay, wonderful. Hi,
I'm back.
Wonderful, wonderful. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of our program. I wanted to start off the discussion by wishing you all a happy International Women's Day and ask, what does this day mean to you? Why is it important that we have a day that is dedicated to women? Why is it important for both men and women to recognize and celebrate the contribution of women to society on this day? And let's start with Mir Siddiqui.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. It's great to be here with all the panelists on this International Women's Day. So, I think for me, when I reflect on the work that I do day to day, and I think about who I work with and how things get done, it's really the women I work with, and I see that every day. So this day, really, it's a moment to reflect on how far we've come, and also an opportunity to think about the future and the possibilities we have ahead as we work together on tackling gender equality in all the ways, inequality in all the ways that it shows up. So really think also you can't do much of this work without allies and teamwork. So that's, I see it every day in the work that I do as an elected official. But we have to celebrate women every day, I think, and how many achievements that women contribute to our society. But it is great to have a day that we can actually focus on and reflect.
Dr. Syed, same question. What does this day mean to you, and why is it important for men and women to celebrate?
Thanks for the opportunity. Excited to be here. Well, International Women's Day to me is a real nod to the fact that when women succeed in a society, that entire society is elevated and it's lifted up. And so in the communities around the world where we see women in an oppressive state, I think, we see how that society suffers. And so for us, having women celebrate each other, elevate each other, not knock each other down, it's such an important day, but also recognizing the work ahead of us for the young girls in our community and lifting them up so they're able to serve in leadership capacities as well. So this is an amazing day, and I'm excited to share this space with each of you.
So thank you so much. Dr. Zia? Same question.
Thank you, Sumbul. I'm very appreciative of this dialogue today because, we get to share ideas and solutions on how to advance gender equality and to improve societies. We know that the glass ceiling for women in political leadership access exist. And, we also know that data confirms that there are many gaps in women's representation across the board. So as we celebrate International Women's Day, Sumbul, as you asked, I'm thankful for this conversation and hopeful that from our discussion today, we can add value to the understanding of the modest progress that has been made in women's political leadership as we look more closely at the significant gaps that still exist in women's representation across positions of power and influence. And we know that when more women work, that economies prosper and productivity increases and businesses benefit from organizational effectiveness and growth. And we also know that if, more women are in leadership positions, that change and progress happens at a faster rate. Corruption levels decrease and democratic processes strengthen. So studies show us that there are absolute benefits to having more inclusive political systems, and the conversation should be directed towards how we can encourage women's political participation. And I'm looking forward to hearing our dynamic panelists share their thoughts and also share their journeys as they trailblaze through this very male-dominated space. So thank you, Sumbul.
No, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Aisha, what about you? Why do you think it's so important for us to recognize women's efforts?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I definitely want to just echo what everyone has said, and then most importantly, just emphasize the systems that we're living in. And I know we've heard recently a lot about structural racism, but a lot of this applies as well to sexism. And I think that we need to look at how our political systems, our judicial systems, are really, really dominated by men, and as a result of that, women all over the world are subjugated and exploited. And so by celebrating International Women's Day, we're giving them a reason to have these dialogues to, essentially bring women up to the same level playing field.
Awesome, thank you. And Talat, why do you think that it's important that we celebrate International Women's Day?
Well, thank you for hosting this important landmark event. It is important for International Day to celebrate this International Day because it recognizes that women are the rocks of the family and the nation. They bring change, and it is important for our future generations to see the women playing the leading role, not in the family, but in their communities and in their nation. So we are the role model, and we need to move forward asserting our identity as a woman.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for your responses. I do want to just take a quick second to recognize our sisters in Pakistan who took part in the Aurat March, which is an amazing effort. So we were with you, and we stand with you in hopes that, inshallah, women and girls in Pakistan continue to increase their quality of life. So we do want to recognize that was going on. I guess with time difference, it was maybe kind of this morning early or late last night, but it's going on. Let me ask, so we have seen an increase of Pakistani American women engaged in the political space since the last election. And prior to that, I think that it's continuously going up, that our women from our community are more politically engaged. What does that mean for our diaspora at large? And what are some of the barriers to women's participation? And this can be, whoever wants to respond to this can go ahead.
Let me respond.
Okay.
All right. So the most, in our diaspora, in the Pakistani Muslim diaspora, Indian Pakistani, but basically South Asian, the most important barrier that I felt, was fundraising. Okay. Fundraising was a challenge for me. People do not understand the importance of donating to the funds for candidates who are running for the office. And the other obstacle that I faced, I'm sad to say, somebody voiced it also, it is the male misogynistic behavior of the men in our communities who do not want the women to take the leadership role, unfortunately. So that is something that we need to address. Everybody is in this together, fighting for recognition of our community, of our needs, And as such, we need to work together. So those are the two obstacles that I faced when I ran for office. What was the other question, Sumbul?
Oh, that was basically
Okay.
it. Yeah, absolutely. And has anyone else faced that experience? Have you guys had issues with, misogyny from community members or just from the greater community?
Absolutely, I can speak to that. So, no organization that I'm currently a member of, thankfully, I haven't experienced it. If anything, I've had a very welcoming experience in some of the recent organizations that I've joined where they really do want to hear the voices of women and empower them. But in the broader community, I will say, there has been a backlash. And I think a lot of it really is this cultural element of, not having women in the public sphere, right? And things that go generations back, the visibility of women, whether that's your physical appearance or your voice. I have had comments, I've had people get upset about, in Urdu, they say leja, like your tone. And it's like, oh, well, her leja is wrong. And it's like, okay, well, if you're trying to make a point and you're passionate about something, it's really interesting because, you would never hear that, that type of comments addressed to a man, right? Is that, oh, that his tone is off. So I think especially in our society, this whole obsession, I think, with the way that women appear, the way that they speak, everything has to be according to a specific protocol that a man decides. And, time's up for that. That's just not acceptable anymore.
Absolutely. I hear you. Senna, Sumbul, Ameena, do you guys have any experience with the same issue?
So I would like to add that, I have been a part of a couple of different diaspora organizations through the last few years. And, on the boards of these organizations, we still have not achieved gender parity. Right. So we have more male leaders on these boards. And I think that that helps set the tone, that helps set the culture. Although these organizations also, as Aisha mentioned, have also been very welcoming of younger females, younger women coming into, kind of an advisory capacity, maybe not so much in the leadership roles. I think that when we talk about misogyny, I think we also need to talk about age. I think that, with aunties and uncles, predominantly leading the leadership roles in our community diaspora organizations, a lot of times they look to the younger women leaders as, as kids, right? So I think that that's another variable that compounds that sort of a barrier for our generation. I will like to say that when we talk about barriers for women's participation, especially in, Sumbul and Senna would love to hear, and Talat, I would love to hear your comments on this as well, is, when you're running for election, you obviously need a party nomination. Party nominations also come with financial support, not just from the diaspora community, but from the mainstream community. So we know that, both political parties have very different ways of approaching women politicians, particularly in the party systems. And I think that does play out, and being from a South Asian descent, that also compounds to that barrier. I think that that's a very real barrier, as Talat pointed out, finances, campaign financing, also party nominations, and then also recognition within our own diaspora organizations, political organizations. Do they support you or do they not support you financially, and et cetera?
Right, absolutely. Mir Siddiqui, do uncles ever call you, do they ever treat you like a kid?
Yeah, I think it's, as I reflect, there has been ageism. There's been this notion of, you don't have the life experience to kind of, tell me about how things work. But generally, I think in Cambridge, where it's nonpartisan, and so that makes it much easier. But I think what's been said about fundraising, there's many barriers for fundraising for, women, but especially women of color. And then just, making sure you're getting your name out there. And, I didn't face too much Islamophobia. I faced a lot of questions around where I was from, and where my name was from. And, even in a place, Cambridge is a very, you're often in competition of like, who's the most liberal, but it's still, it does come up. And, what I've seen, it's a lot of conversations and sharing with people, where you've grown up, and even with the uncles and aunties, I think eventually I found so much support in the community because what they said was, it's really important for us to see that people who look like me, be in that position so that they can make a call. They can call in Hindi or Urdu and say, I need help with this, I need help with that. So I think there was initially some explaining that, why I'm doing this. And then, a lot of people just came around and there's just so much support. So it's been great.
That's awesome. And Senna, you're running now for Dallas City Council. Have you received support from both, the Pakistani American community as well as just the greater community in Dallas?
Absolutely. I mean, when we look at why there are so many Pakistani American women running for office, I think this speaks to the fact that we pursued our education, we pursued our careers, we prioritized ourselves, which is something that a lot of our moms and our grandmothers were unable to do. And so us being in this position where we are able to run for office speaks to the freedom that has been generated because of these opportunities that have been provided to us by the sacrifices of our families. And so this really speaks to the freedom of women in American society, and it's a beautiful thing to see. When we talk about obstacles, fundraising is a big obstacle because we don't have generational support in this country. Most of us have families and we're first generation. And so that means that a lot of that infrastructure that is needed to fundraise at a monstrous level is just not there. Now, with that said, because we have roots here in this country, for those of us who are raised here and born and raised here, we can lean on our colleagues from our workspace and our friends from, growing up. And so we do have some network here that allows us to show that we are present. And so far, all the feedback I've gotten is people are really excited to see representation. In Dallas being one of the largest cities in the United States, we still do not have Muslim representation. We still do not have South Asian representation. So this is definitely a big step toward breaking that glass ceiling.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I've seen a couple of comments. We're mostly talking about from the perspective of Pakistani American women in political leadership. What can we do anything in relation or in any way to help the lives of women in Pakistan, women and girls in Pakistan? Is there a way that we can give back to our sisters that are in Pakistan from here in the United States? How can we help them through political leadership? And anyone could respond.
I'll try to tackle that one. So we have a comment that says that 17% of women in Pakistan have quotas, reserved seats in Pakistan. And I think that is so crucial because when we talk about representation, like Senna mentioned and Sumbul and others mentioned, I think it's important to have a system in place that allows for women to enter this very male-dominated space. And I think that quotas have been recognized around the world as being that avenue that means to establish somewhat of a semblance, somewhat of, an opportunity for women. And I think in Pakistan, we do see that. And, as we're having this discussion here in the United States and in the backdrop, we have an Earth March going on, which is quite dynamic, quite revolutionary, quite historic. And I think that just by us, being present in this space with Senna running in a major city like Dallas, in Sumbul, you're in Cambridge, you've already, won the election, and Talat, same here. I think that we are showing women in Pakistan also that, there is some sort of sisterhood, there's a camaraderie, we are talking about representing ourselves because we all come from that same post-colonial cultural implications and barriers, whatever we want to call those. And so we're all fighting the same fight, whether we're here or in Pakistan.
That's right. That's true. That's absolutely correct. Does anyone else have any comments on that?
I feel like Aisha's about to say something. Let me know if I'm cutting you off. Sorry, Aisha.
Go ahead.
So the other thing I think, is important to recognize is that we as Pakistani women, coming from, as we're talking about right now, post-colonial effects, right? We have trauma that is not reconciled in a lot of ways. And so we often see women working through that trauma and getting to a place where they can stand on their own 2 feet and addressing mental health. And I think that also needs to be an important part of the conversation is we didn't just show up, right? We didn't just get here. It was a lot of hard work. Pushing through some serious stigma growing up. So even though right now we have generated quite a bit of respect and we're not hitting those same barriers, those barriers were there growing up. And so, for young girls, and young women, how do you overcome that? How do you address trauma so that you can go on to serve at your greatest and your most optimal capacity? And to do that, we really do have to address, what sets us back as a community.
And Aisha, did you want to add on to that?
Sure. And I'm just going to kind of take this back to just visibility. I think for, our sisters in Pakistan that are marching, that's really the message that I'm hearing. I woke up to WhatsApp messages by people getting offended about this Aurat March for all the wrong reasons. And I think that as a culture and as a community, we really need to stop getting offended over women wanting to march in the streets. This is literally the basic foundation of a democracy, of how to exercise your rights as a citizen. Sure, you can disagree with some of the messages, but being offended because you're seeing women on the streets. There's just so much misunderstanding. There's barriers as it relates to language. There's certain slogans in English. They think it's a Western, concept, but this isn't a Western concept. This is a Muslim concept. This is an Islamic concept. Pakistan has had, one of the first female prime ministers in the country who had a tragic death. To Dr. Senna's point about trauma, man, if I have family members telling me oh, you should run for office, my gut instinct is based on our history, I don't know if that's such a good idea. So let's address the trauma. Let's address the communication gap. But let's let the women be visible, let them speak. Let's hear what they have to say and really have an intention to have an understanding of, to understand what it is that they're wanting to address.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that some people were offended about the slogan "Meri Jism Meri Marzi," which just means, my body, my choice, right? And for some reason, some people decided that meant something dirty, which I think is kind of a reflection on those individuals, and in countries, and in a country like Pakistan, where women are often, pressured to have children maybe earlier than they want to, keep having children, even though it's detrimental to their own health, and so many other issues. A slogan like "Meri Jism Meri Marzi" is very, very important and very, very relevant. It's a life and death situation. So I completely agree with you. I was going to ask, since we were kind of talking about trauma and how that relates, Talat, you have dealt with a lot of crisis and trauma, regarding your son, Salman. And if you'd like to, maybe tell the audience a little bit about what happened. And then I wanted to ask, do you think that your experiences relating to that crisis and relating to that trauma, do you think that makes you better suited to be in the role of political leadership? Oh, Talat, you're muted. Hold on.
And Salman was an NYPD cadet, and he responded to the call of duty and rushed to the Twin Towers as he was going into work that day. He worked in Manhattan at Rockefeller University, and that was his first year in the medical program. And so he rushed down to the towers, and he had forgotten his cell phone on the job the day before, so there was no way to connect with him. And when he didn't come home that night, we were not worried so much because, we knew he would go down there. But then as hours converted into days and days into weeks and weeks into months, it was traumatic. My husband and I, we went down searching for him for like a few days downtown near the Twin Towers. And of course, nobody could have recognized him amongst those ashes and the debris that fell that day. And so what happened was I contacted the NYPD, and they had given us few numbers to contact at the armory when we were looking for him, searching for him. And I don't know why, but they started investigating him as someone linked, associated with those attacks. And that, of course, was because of his first name, Muhammad. And that put me on the path of speaking up, defending my faith. Not only my family and my community, but most importantly, my faith. Because the attackers were supposedly Muslim, and they were not, none of them were American. They were all from Saudi Arabia. So they say, you know. And anyway, so coming back to those days, we searched everywhere. And so I started speaking up, and the first few, and then we went to Mecca on October 11th, exactly a month after. We went to Mecca to pray for his safe return. And the evening that we are leaving, New York Times, New York Post, and Daily News, all these three journalists came to my house, and I asked them, and the Tribune guy from Chicago, and I asked them, what brings you back here exactly a month later? And they told us that there's a flyer circulating, the NYPD and the MTA, mass transit, with your son's picture, asking someone to, if someone has seen him, to step forward. And later I got that flyer from someone from my social circle, and it was not it was a very bad flyer. It says, wanted by terrorist task force, has medical ID, has, you know, all those things, chemistry major. And we were interrogated by our congressman at the time in Bayside, Gary Ackerman, and they came to the house to interrogate. It was a tough time. So that put me, you know, to defend, and I started speaking up. And to this day, I speak very ferociously defending the community and my faith. And the tough position that I found myself at the time, I had become a pariah in my own nation. That how can this be? My son, okay, he wasn't born here. That's what Gary Ackerman said. If he's not born here, he is an outsider, and he could be whatever they want him to. He could be detained. So he made me write a letter to John Ashcroft, asking him to release him. So they led me, my own government here, led me to believe that he is detained. That's cruel. And then, so we came back from Mecca, and then there was a message on the answering machine that Ms. Hamdani come to the office. We have news about Salman from Ackerman's office, and that's when he interrogated us and everything. But now he's a very good friend. So there was October, November, December, January. On March 20th, the recovery was abolished. No more recovery from that site of the World Trade Center, and it was closed. And so we got two men from the tall black men in black coats, rather, at 11 p.m. at my house, knocking, and they said, you know, they gave us the card and contact the medical examiner. Your son died that day in those attacks. So the next day, my husband and I, we went down to NYU and met the medical examiner, and he had a package, a file of all those. They found his body parts in 34 pieces, and they gave us his jeans and one sock and a belt. My husband said those are his clothes. He was 23 years old. And so I said, I want to have this testing done by an independent person, scientist, to determine whether these are the remains of Salman or not. And he pulled the file back to himself and he said, go get yourself a lawyer, Ms. Hamdani. So there are nuances that still don't make sense to me to this day. So on March 20th, they gave everybody a body bag, whoever was not recovered from that site, I presume, but we were given a body bag and we were told his remains are at this place, you know, some funeral parlor in Queens. And then, so we arranged a funeral on April 5th at the mosque, 93 Street in Uptown Manhattan, where he used to go and pray Fridays. And then we buried him. So
Talat, I'm sorry.
That experience made me realize we are immigrants. No matter how many years, we are the first generation immigrants. And we need to challenge these prejudices. It's not easy. It will never be easy for a mom to bury their child. But that gave me the strength, and it validated my voice, because I'm not lying what happened to me. I faced Islamophobia in the raw, and I went searching for him, and I went to Guantanamo Bay because they were high-value detainees. I thought maybe he was one of them. It was a very hard road, but alhamdulillah, like, I'm here today fighting for defending my faith, and I didn't get much, what can I say, flashback, or no, not flashback, rejection from my mainstream community. The media was wrong. You know, the media was wrong, especially New York Post, you know, and you know, the Post has a reputation, Murdoch Group. So, and then 2 years later, you know, 2.5 years later, my husband died. That shattered us, you know. So the three of us, I have 2 more boys, alhamdulillah. So that is my story. So never forget you're an immigrant here. Never forget that you are a Muslim. I remember saying that he made transition from this life to the next easy for me. And I pray when the time comes, he come and take me. That's it.
Talat, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for the Pakistani American community, for the Muslim community. I was maybe around 15 when September 11th happened, and you know, in a small town in Texas, you can imagine the racism and the Islamophobia that, you know, I had to deal with, my siblings had to deal with, we all had to deal with. And I remember reading about you. You know, I've read about you for over so many different years, and I always admired you so much for the strength that you have, and you know, Allah make it easy for you and reward you and your family. And you know, the way I met Talat was through the Pakistanis for Biden's efforts, which, you know, Aisha was leading. So I'm very happy that we got to meet you and that we have such a strong leader as yourself. And it is important for us to be engaged politically. It is important for the reasons that you said.
Definitely.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Senna, you were also dealt with a traumatic time and a crisis while you were with the city of Dallas. when we had the first case of Ebola, and with the 4 Dallas police officers who were attacked. Do you think that has, going through that trauma, or going through that moment of crisis, do you think that that's made you stronger and made you better suited for political leadership?
Yeah, I mean, Talat, thank you for sharing your story. That's a lot to process, and I have a lot of respect for all that you've done and what you continue to stand for. So for the traumatic events that we went through in Dallas, I'll be honest, growing up in a family where we endured quite a bit of trauma personally and as a family, and then connecting that with these other times when you see people suffering. The summer of 2016 was my summer of death, right? I had 5 funerals to go through within 3 weeks, and I'll tell you, when you endure trauma and then when you have to work through trauma, what it really just goes back to is that you have to treat people as human beings. Everyone is a human being, right? The homeless person who's down the street from you is a human being. The person who cannot afford to pay for milk is a human being. We have to see one another as human beings. And when we are able to do that, then we are able to address through policy and actually address issues to not continue to, surface level, put a Band-Aid on things, but actually dig in and start to address issues. So because of my life experiences through my nonprofit, we created a program called Fight Club, which combines boxing, yoga, and therapy for women who are survivors of trauma here in the Dallas community. So addressing trauma is extremely important. And, when we had the protests last year in the city of Dallas, there was an immediate vote to defund the police. But some people in the community in this part of the city were simply not ready for that. And so, when we address, issues about the pain that people are feeling, I think we have to look at how do we build bridges? How do we bring people to the table to actually find solutions? And so there's actually a trauma-informed policing model that's being practiced in different parts of the United States right now that looks at the re-traumatization of individuals, particularly youth, but it also looks at addressing secondary trauma for police. And I think we have an opportunity to address that with police and fire. So when we talk about trauma, it really is being cognizant of what another human being is going through, having empathy and compassion and leadership, and implementing that in policy so that we can actualize change.
And Mir Siddiqui, you got to be mayor during COVID, so you obviously had to deal with this emergency situation, a crisis, and how has that made you stronger as a leader?
I think with this crisis, it's been a lot about effective communication and working together under a lot of stress, and acknowledging that we may not have the answers, right? But we have to figure out a process to get to the answers. And so it's definitely made me a stronger leader. It's definitely made me recognize that there have been so many weaknesses that our city has grappled with that were there before COVID. But COVID has actually provided this opportunity to do what we should have done, right? We knew kids didn't have internet at home. We knew they didn't have computers, right? And we had that, we knew it was happening. And with COVID, we had to act very fast. And so I think it's taught me how to, move quickly, but to always listen. I think listening is key. There's, a lot of questions that our community members have. People are scared. So you have to be there for people in their weakest moments. And so this crisis has been very challenging. And as now we navigate the vaccination rollout, there's always, there's a lot of work to be done. But a lot of great examples of resilience in the community and coming together and working with my colleagues on the city council, on the school committee, and really just being collaborative. And that's what COVID has shown me.
Sorry, I have trouble unmuting myself. Thank you for that answer. I wanted to just switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the past presidential elections and the role that Pakistani American women played in that. And this question is open to the panel. I was going to start with Aisha. What were some differences you noticed in the engagement level of Pakistani American women comparing when you compare the level of engagement with Hillary's campaign, previously?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, with Hillary's campaign, I mean, I think that Pakistani American women just really, not only just Pakistani American women, I should say all women. I mean, that was a historic race for us, right? Is that, in the first time in U.S. history, we have a potential, female president, commander-in-chief, to come in. And I think that we all had a sense of comfort and ease. I think there may have been a tad bit of overconfidence in retrospect in kind of just the strategy for that particular campaign. I know that I was involved in, campaigning here in Texas. We hosted some events with a few organizations in town. But, just to kind of check off the list of what your typical campaign contribution looks like. But then when we saw what happened and the huge upset, when the other candidate won, it was just really incredibly eye-opening for us. And I think it really pushed us into action. And I think one theme that I'm hearing, from all the speakers here is that when you are impacted and when you feel pain in any form, in any shape or form, that really prompts you into action. And the amount of Pakistani American women leadership that we witnessed in Pakistanis for Biden, I can't even explain, exactly how that feeling was, because it was not only Pakistani American women, but I saw South Asian women of all backgrounds, of all skill sets come in and really take the charge on the grassroots organizing. And I think our entire, National Council, the leadership, the directors, they all hands down said that, Pakistani women really led the show here in all the battleground states that were involved. So I noticed a huge difference between this recent Biden campaign. So yeah, and of course, when I say Biden, I should say Biden-Harris, because I think Kamala Harris was definitely a fueling force in that, at least for me personally, and I'm sure for fellow South Asian women.
Absolutely. And is anyone else engaged with the presidential campaign? I know we had Mir Sumbul Siddiqui take part in an event for Muslim women for Biden. Talat, I think you were also active with Pakistanis for Biden. Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, yes. So I made phone calls advocating for Biden, especially they wanted in those states where he was running low. So I made phone calls, and then of course I motivated the community. And because of that, my Democrat, party told me that the Muslim vote, the Desi vote went up by 18% in where I live now. So it is very important to mobilize, because our women, I'm mostly engaged with women at the mosque. There are 2 mosques over here. So I'm engaged with them, and they know me from my original campaign. And so they believe, and some of them called me, who should we vote for? So that was something very amazing. So I am their political spokesperson, and I do guide them, and they do listen to me. So it is important to remain mobilized. And unfortunately, Hillary did not win, but now Kamala Harris won with Joe Biden. So it does make a difference, and we need to be focused, because I'm a Democrat from day one. And as you see now, in 1 month, he has done so much. This administration has done so much positive, what can I say? He's taken actions, not only of economy, but COVID. So COVID is on the, is sliding down now. And hopefully, we will just keep moving forward and focus on other issues. They have forgiven the 10,000 student loans. So if those of you who have some loans, go look into it. They have giving those loans, you know. So that's it.
I need more than 10,000. Someone tells
you can. They
Joe
have a
Biden.
plan for 50,000, but you have to reach out to them.
Right. That's something I'm definitely pushing and organizing around. And Talat, you please also
definitely.
get your group, you know, lead them.
Yeah, 50 grand is a large amount of money, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, wonderful. And Ameena, I wanted to chat with you. You keep getting bounced off, but you served as a political appointee in an executive level cabinet, and you were the youngest to do so at the time, or I'm sure maybe until now. What are your takeaways from that experience? And just tell us a little bit more. What are the benefits of serving as a political appointee?
Thank you, Sumbul. Yeah, so, this was a couple of years ago in St. Louis County government. And, I think as we've always, been talking about the importance of having more Pakistani American women, Pakistani Americans, Muslim Americans in that public sphere, I think it's very important for us as a community to have individuals that serve on boards and commissions within our own cities, towns, municipalities, state. I'm a very big proponent of local governments. I think that's where, a lot of the engagements take place. That's where, you engage with your neighbors, with your coworkers, in your own community. And I think that's where you can really change mindsets. That's where you can really, introduce this new idea of, hey, we're all the same, regardless of where we come from, regardless of our race, ethnicity, etc., background. So when I served as a political appointee in St. Louis County government, I was very fortunate to serve in the executive cabinet of the St. Louis County Executive, and that meant that I had direct interaction with a lot of department heads, a lot of the different departments, to talk about ways to kind of implement more immigrant-friendly policies within the space of the local government. And I think that my takeaway from there was, this idea, this understanding that when we're working together to solve problems, the solutions also lie locally through a very multi-stakeholder approach. And what that means is by pulling in civil society, by pulling in our diaspora organizations, religious organizations, by pulling in civic engagement organizations, by pulling in teachers and doctors and so forth, to try to find solutions to problems, to very localized problems, because, all solutions, I'm a big proponent of all solutions coming from within the local communities, coming from local neighborhoods. And I think that one of the main experiences that I was very fortunate to engage in was helping to draft a policy for a hijab policy, a headscarf policy for our community, which is now replicated across the United States in various justice services departments. And I think that was so important, coming from a very conservative space in St. Louis, where, we had the Jewish community, the Muslim community, the at-large Christian community and other denominations coming together and understanding what that meant from a cultural perspective, from a religious perspective, and being tolerant, being sensitive. It was around awareness. It was around understanding each other as humans. And I think that's what really led to everyone around the table, just one, having a seat at the table, having a voice, and then realizing that, hey, this is something we need to do, because we need to focus on inclusive communities and inclusive societies, because that is what helps us in the end. So, going back to political appointmentships, I think it's very important for our community to engage in those at all different levels. I also serve on my local parks board in my small town of Mills River, North Carolina. And I think that, just having a say in what's going on in our community, whether it's our parks, it's our school board, I think that's very important. And it helps us project a voice, and it helps us bring ourselves into that public space.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So we are, getting towards the end of our program. So I wanted to ask all of our panelists this final question. And it's basically, what advice would you give to young Pakistani American women looking to pursue political leadership opportunities? What advice would you give to the Pakistani American community at large? And we can start with Mir Siddiqui.
As I yawn constantly. The advice I'd give is to really do it and take that opportunity. I think what I've seen is so many people, especially women, they're like, let me think about it. Let me research it. Do I have the qualifications? Do I do this? Do I do that? Men will get up and say, I'm going to run, and so, you have the power to do that. You have the power to run. You have the power to be involved. And it's really important. I always say this, you can't be what you can't see. And I think that when there are people who look like us, who have our shared life experiences, change can happen. There's so much on the policy level, especially local level, you can do if you are involved. And so I would just say, definitely reach out if you have questions to your mentors. Feel free to contact me anytime if you're interested. I think, it really is important to have each other to ask questions, to say, how hard was it? What's your advice? So always ask questions, and know that you have a supportive community there for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. Sayed, what's your advice to the community?
I agree with Mir Siddiqui. Representation matters. And so for young women to see themselves in this position, it's important for us to continue to try. And the advice to them is, if you dream something, then chase the dream. It's important for us to actually have that hope and to be able to see ourselves in these positions of change as change agents for our communities. So if you see something and you want to make a difference, then go make that difference. And there's definitely a community here of women who have also blazed some trails, and we're here to support you and help you in any way we can.
Thank you. Ameena?
My comments will resonate with what everyone has already said. Again, as Senna said, representation matters. It's key. Our voice matters. And, our representation needs to reflect what our community needs, where our community is now and where we're headed forward. I would like to also add, Sumbul, that we are at a very pivotal point within our diaspora community where we've seen, a record number of Pakistani Americans trying to contest for elections, running for elections, it's engaged in that political process. Aisha, you and Sumbul were part of this dynamic upset that happened in Texas, where we saw this shift in Pakistani Americans just engaging in that sort of a political process. We saw that in Georgia as well. And across the United States. And I think that, with Senna, you're running, Talat, you're already in office doing great things. Sumbul, you as well. I think that this is such an exciting time because this is history in the making for our diaspora right now. And as a researcher, who kind of just sits back and observes all of you guys as you're doing the amazing things that you're doing in your spaces, I'm very excited. And I think that, I'm looking forward to the next 2 years, to the next 4 years and 10 years on to see, where we go. But I can say that, right now with organizations in our community like APPAC, 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 we're noticing that, more women, more younger women are being mentored, to take those leadership spots and spaces, no matter how difficult it is at times, right? But so I'm very hopeful and excited, and I'm very thankful for this conversation. And my thoughts with everyone else, especially younger women, is, if you have something to say, just say it. And, you will find your own kind of support out there. We exist, other people exist as well. And you will find your own little group as well for that support.
That's awesome. Thank you, Ameena. Aisha, what advice do you have?
Sure. So my advice is, I guess, first for the young Pakistani American women out there, and this is also advice to myself. I have to remind myself of this on a daily basis, is don't get discouraged. I wish I could tell you that, being a Pakistani American in political leadership is easy, but it's not. And, you will very quickly build a thick skin, but regardless of what you're faced with, we saw everything under the sun during this Pakistanis for Biden campaign. It was a little unimaginable, the types of experiences that myself and my colleague had. But again, don't get discouraged. We need you here. We need your voices here. And to the Pakistani American brothers, don't be part of the problem. The future is female. Make some room. We're again, this is going to help us all as a community. We have a lot to catch up on. So just when you see a Pakistani American woman that has expressed an interest, make sure that you are part of the solution. So that's my tip.
Absolutely, the future is female. I love that. And Talat, what advice do you have for young Pakistani women and the Pakistani community?
Well, I agree with everything everyone else said, and piggybacking on representation. As they say, if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. So that is very important, that's why it is important that our younger generation, especially the youth, they should get involved in local politics. And the best way to start is getting involved with the school boards, the school committees and the PTAs and, the youth councils. And that is the way to move forward. Get involved, make a difference, educate yourself, and empower yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed this discussion. It was amazing. I'm surrounded, it's a powerhouse in here right now. So thank you all. Again, happy Women's Day and happy International Women's Day to all of our sisters across the world. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's all give us one to women.